Good evening and welcome to the July 27, 2015 Hillsborough Township Board of Education meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. In accordance with the State Sunshine Law of New Jersey, adequate notice of this meeting of the Hillsborough Township Board of Education was provided on July 23, 2015 to the Hillsborough Beacon and Courier News. May I have a roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood?
Surely. Ms. Bogoshevsky?
Here.
Ms. Santafonte? Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Dutta? Mr. Gillette? Mrs. Haas?
Here.
Okay. Mrs. Haley?
Here.
Ms. Wasson?
Here.
And Mr. Kintz?
Here.
We have a
We
quorum.
have a quorum. I'd like to read a motion to go into executive session. Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231 of the laws of 1975 provides that a public body may exclude the public from that portion of a meeting of which the public body discusses certain matters for which confidentiality is required, as is permitted in Section 7B of the Act. Resolved by the Board of Education of the Township of Hillsborough and the County of Somerset and the State of New Jersey as follows. The matters to be discussed are 2 harassment, intimidation, and bullying hearings and a personnel matter. The matters discussed in executive session shall be disclosed to the public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists. I'd like to entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved. Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we're going to executive session. We'll be back at 7:30 for the regularly scheduled open meeting. Thank you. Okay, we're back from executive session. Thank you and good evening. Welcome to the July 27th, 2015 Hillsborough Township Board of Education meeting. May I have a roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood?
Surely. Ms. Bogoshevsky?
Here.
Ms. Santafonte?
Here.
Mr. Cohen? Yes, here. Mr. Dutta? Mr. Gillette?
Here.
Mrs. Haas?
Here.
Mrs. Haley?
Here.
Ms. Wasson?
Here.
Mr. Kintz?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have correspondence as is listed in the agenda, and I'd like to hand it off to Dr. Schiff for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Kintz. The board has been working and exploring facilitators to lead our strategic planning process over the past few months. The governance committee has checked references. We have interviewed multiple groups to do that type of facilitation. And as a result of the work of the governance committee, they are unanimously recommending for the full board consideration of Charles Ivory, who is here with us tonight, as our facilitator for our next strategic planning process. And in preparation for that, I asked Dr. Ivory to come tonight to share with the board directly the proposal as well as with the community and be available to answer any of your questions. With that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Charles Ivory. Dr. Ivory, if you don't mind talking into the microphone, please do. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation, members of the Board of Education, to be here this evening with you. I appreciate your interest to work with me in particular, but with our agency, the Educational Information and Resource Center. And I don't mean to turn my back to all of you, but I'll be speaking this way, but I will try to reference the audience as well. I'd like to really respond to your questions primarily and to talk with you a little bit about your expectations for what you believe that strategic planning will be able to do for Hillsborough Public Schools. By way of introducing our process, however, to tell you maybe a few highlights of what might be different about it and why we think so many school districts have asked us to do this work with them. I've worked in about 40 school districts over the last 3.5 years, from Bergen to Cape May, in delivering services and working with them really to facilitate public meetings. The work that I do with strategic planning is substantially built around community engagement. It's about bringing the larger community of Hillsborough Township together to talk with each other about what our beliefs are, what our expectations are for our youngsters, and identifying the directions that we would like to take over the next 1 to 5 years. And I say 1 to 5 years because it is so hard today to plan out much beyond a few years. And I believe as our work would develop together, that would be quickly recognized. You have in front of you a maroon folder that I hope I distributed them properly, but the maroon folder has a couple of pieces in it. One, there is a catalog that describes a lot of the services that we provide out of EIRC. We work in all 21 counties across New Jersey. We are a public nonprofit organization. We are actually a local education agency by statute. We're technically a school district, even though we do not have children, which makes us somewhat of an anomaly because there are no other agencies in New Jersey with that status other than EIRC and school districts, public school districts across the state. Our work is very diverse, and sometimes school districts do not even realize that they're working with EIRC. For example, if they have the New Jersey Child Assault Prevention Program in their schools, that is a program out of EIRC. On the way up, I saw a poster along the highway for a monarch butterfly exhibition and celebration in one of the local communities. And the New Jersey Monarch Teacher Network, which is in every one of the 21 counties, is also a project that is out of EIRC. We work in 38 states and 20 foreign countries. You have also copies of the two proposals in hard copy. I know that you've received them already, but just as a matter of regular business, I brought them with me this evening. And I'm going to speak from the description of the services that we outline in those two pieces that form our proposal. So the first project I usually try to encourage boards of education to be engaged in is an internal meeting, and that is with the Board of Education members and the administration. I designed that particular evening, and none of my programs are more than 90 minutes, unless you want to expand them beyond the agenda that I create. Having been a superintendent of schools and a member of several boards of education, my experience has been, and it has been the case in working with other boards around the state, that while we may have really terrific relationships across the board and between the board and members of the teaching staff and the administration, often those relationships are very much on the level of mutual respect and collegial relationships, friendly relationships, but very seldom with an opportunity to talk deeply about the work that we're all here for. And so that evening is really, in an hour and a half, designed to really bring out to the forefront what some of the priorities are that administration and Board of Education members are thinking about, and to provide an opportunity for you to really share that thinking and to talk about where it might go. And the other side of it is that I have found that many school districts like that because when they go into the community engagement, they feel a little more unified as a body about what the mutual thinking is across the board and administration. The core of the program is 3 evenings. I say evenings because that's what most boards of education choose to do. I've done Saturdays as well. But 1.5-hour meetings, 3 of them. They're designed around 3 topics. The first evening is about Hillsborough pride. What's working in the school district? What are we proud that's happening in our community? And people will say to me, well, I really came here to talk about issues and problems that we have in the school district. And invariably, if you can turn out 100 people, we can count on some of them coming that evening for that purpose. When we talk about what's working well, it's hard not to refer to what we might do better, because that's what schools are about. What can we do better? What are we doing today that can look better tomorrow, that will be more effective for our youngsters and assist our educators in addressing the work in classrooms and otherwise to support those youngsters? And it works really well. It launches a program that is then going to move in a very positive direction. I also tell people when I'm walking around the room that, and talking with the various groups, because they'll be in groups working, that when we talk about what's working well, we can't help talking about the contrast to that. Well, I understand that this is an issue or that that's an issue, and that's okay, and it comes out on the table. Each one of our meetings has minutes attached to it. We use cooperative planning strategies, so people are writing on chart papers and on placemats, which is a large chart paper activity that we use. The important part of the minutes is that every idea that is generated during this process is recorded. And therefore, in the end, when you are working on your drafting of the plan, you have every single idea. And it's very powerful because the people who come in to work with you and your staff and yourselves really appreciate the respect that's shown as a result of their ideas, your ideas, actually appearing in hard copy. We share those minutes. We have you blast them out to all of the people who attend the meetings and to other listservs that you have, so that for those who cannot attend a meeting, they have the minutes. The meetings are building on each other, but they're also discrete, so that we encourage people, if they cannot attend one of the meetings, that's okay. Even if you didn't attend the first meeting, come the second meeting. Maybe you can only come the third meeting. We can fit you in every time, every place, and you'll be able to contribute as though you have been at all of the 3 meetings. The second meeting is about the vision. We don't talk about vision. We talk about answering the following question. If we were here 3 years from now, what would you like to be able to say has happened in the Hillsborough School District that really makes you proud that we have achieved? And we sort of backwards plan into what that vision is going to be for Hillsborough School. Between that meeting and the third meeting, we take all of the ideas that emerge, the consensus ideas from session 2, and we categorize them under identified goal areas. And I will work with the superintendent to ensure that we're comfortable with what those goal areas are. And on the third evening, that is designed as an action step meeting. We talk about what are all the possible action steps that the Board of Education and school district and the community might consider taking to enable the achievement of these goal areas and moving forward. And it's a very exciting meeting because we do carousel brainstorming. We have charts flowing around the room, and when it is finished, you'll have hundreds and hundreds of ideas from which to select. Some of those ideas will be easy. Boom, the next day, a school principal can go back and just do it. Doesn't require any special action, maybe no special budgeting either. There'll be other ideas that are much more long-term, and so you begin to start seeing how this turns into a 1 to 3 to 5 year plan. A lot of school districts and a lot of agencies and companies, when they begin strategic planning, begin from the point of data. We choose not to do that because data has a tendency to slow down the thinking, sometimes cuts off lots of creative thinking. So we save the data till the end, and that's an option for you to choose. But in many school districts, they've chosen our 4th night, which is a data night. And on that night, we identify clusters of data and create data expert groups, community members with staff members who will have a chance to look at data that's all public, but that most people never have a chance to see together. And we ask the data groups to review the goal areas where we are projected to be working through the lenses of that data, and to give feedback in terms of strengths and challenges that the school district might have relative to the data. And the data is achievement scores, elementary, middle, high school. The data is ratables. It's about population growth and enrollment, up, down, stable, whatever it might be. So all that kind of data that sits in the central office that now gets collected and shared with the community in a very organized way. Those are the 4 general nights if you choose to do all 4. We also do a a web-based survey. I understand from Dr. Schiff that you may be doing that on your own, which is fine. If you choose to do it on your own, I'll share with you the template that we use, and you can maybe draw from some of those questions if you already have a system in place. Very glad to share that information with you. And finally, I created a 3-evening workshop series that helps the school district actually put together the first draft of the strategic plan. And that's usually a subcommittee of about 24 people who have been invited by the superintendent and the board president to come out and work with us to begin to identify what those goal statements, objective statements, and some suggested activities might be that the Board of Education might ultimately review for consideration. We work to bring out at least 100 people. That's a big challenge in most school districts, even larger school districts. We have lots of templates to help you market, but the bottom line is face-to-face invitations, especially from board members and staff members. We need staff heavily represented at this process. They have a vested interest in the work that's going to come out of strategic planning. We need our parents there. And most of all, we encourage you to invite students. I've had students as low as grade 5, and they have been spectacular in the kinds of roles that they play and the suggestions and ideas that they come forward. When I did this up in TNEC 2 years ago, the students were the absolute stars of that program. And in fact, the groups where they worked, the adults had the youngsters making the presentations to the large group, and it was exceedingly successful. Every place we go, if there are youngsters involved, they just do extremely well. I encourage you to invite students who are in college or out in technical schools who might be around and available to come back and participate. Let us know, having been here for X number of years, what kind of preparation we've done for them, what might be missing, what might we do a little better to help them move forward even more quickly and more effectively and be better prepared for their jobs, their careers as they move on. I'll stop there and be happy to respond to questions you might have.
I'll open it up to board members if they have any questions they have for Dr. Ivory.
So first of all, thank you, Dr. Ivory, for coming out today to speak with us about this. We have read your material. I think it's a good plan. The last time I think that we had that we developed a strategic plan with community input was about 7 or 8 years ago. I don't know if maybe Judy remembers. I think we did do some Saturday mornings with the community. The most recent one we did it just as a board. We didn't do a community. Maybe we did. I don't know if we did maybe a web survey or some other stuff, but we didn't do in person. So it'd be nice to have again. Now, the issue I had with it last time is the people that came to be involved, the community. I don't feel there was a real cross section of Hillsborough represented. I saw many teachers, many retired teachers, many ex-teachers, many would-be teachers, and some board members, and some ex-board members, retired board members, wannabe board members. But I didn't see a lot of parents. I didn't see a lot of retirees. I didn't see a lot of empty nesters. All of those people pay for whatever's going to come out of this. I mean, the strategic plan, let's face it, is going to, if not commit, at least suggest how we're going to spend money over the next 5 years. Some things aren't money. Some things might be just a change in attitude or something else. So the question is, what do we do to get from my opinion, a better cross-section at the community level?
It's a key question, and it lies right at the base of what's going to be successful about your work. That requires your active participation as board members, as school principals, as a superintendent, other officials in the school district to reach out to the constituents who you represent. Everyone comes onto the Board of Education with an agenda. I'd like to think that every one of them is very positive and it's always about the youngsters. My experience as a superintendent has been that by far that is absolutely what happens. But we did come on the board having been encouraged by other people. We might be active in youth leagues, scouts, all kinds of organizations around the community. We might be in the business organization. The personal invitation and recruiting of community members, it lies at the heart of your success for bringing out a cross-section of people. This is the best time to bring the naysayers out. The groups that they will be sitting with, you will not be sitting together as board members. You are spread across the room. It's very important for that. On multiple levels, it's important for the community members to network with you and to feel connected to people who've been elected to represent them on the Board of Education. It is very powerful when that happens. Hopefully you will have members of your township committee or council involved. When I was up in Kearney, for about a year and a half. We really expanded that process, and that's where I actually developed the writing process for Kearney, because they had a new superintendent and she needed some help putting that together. And their mayor was at 3 of the 4 meetings, and it was very powerful for community members to be sitting with their mayor and to be talking with that person about what his aspirations were for kids. Very powerful.
Thank you very much. I think you're exactly right.
Dr. Hassan.
Thank you, Dr. Ivory, for your presentation, and
You're welcome.
And I did enjoy reading the proposal as well. The question that I have has to do with the economic environment in New Jersey and the 2% cap. How do you anticipate bringing that to bear on these meetings and having us build a realistic plan within those economic constraints?
That's one of the reasons why we do the data on the 4th night. Because when you start talking about the education or the economic conditions around which we're working, it really constrains people. It shuts them down in terms of their thinking, and we don't want that to happen. So many good ideas will emerge that really do not cost a lot of money, or maybe any money at all. I've seen it happen time and time again. And people will say, oh, well, you know, we're inviting all these outside people, and will they come up with ideas we can't afford? Yes, they will. But I can guarantee you that at the tables, by using a consensus process for them to identify what their priorities are going to be, those kinds of ideas will not emerge. Now, I'm working in a community right now where they want full-day kindergarten, and it is like the mantra of a substantial percentage of the community, including all the staff, because they have a very diverse population in terms of preparedness coming to school. And they are struggling with that in terms of the finances, because they just do not have the finances to support it. And that becomes a real dilemma. But the whole purpose of a multi-year plan is to create stages of educating the community and bringing people inside, and also to take a very serious look at the way we spend our money. So I ask questions as I move around the room. In that case, are you doing zero-based budget planning? Are you considering what your priorities are, and are your funds aligning with your priorities? And those are the kinds of challenges we have as we move forward in New Jersey. It's very complicated and very difficult for school districts. I wish I could give you a magical answer that we're going to figure out a way to do that. But invariably, finance and facilities becomes one of the areas of work. And those are the kinds of questions that get filtered through the process, because everything we're going to be talking about has some kind of implication for finance and facilities, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we have an action item with regard to this later on in the agenda, and then I'll also report out for the governance committee the review that we had. So there'll be more information to be provided. So, thank you, Dr. Ivory.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kentz. I have a few more items to share with the board and the community. It's my pleasure to announce that Alyssa Kincannon, a member of the Hillsborough High School graduating class of 2015, was honored on Monday, June 29th by the GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network of Central New Jersey chapter, for her leadership role in raising awareness for LGBT teens. She received the Senior Honor Award at the chapter's annual awards gala. Alyssa was with the Gay Straight Alliance for 4 years of her high school career. She received a $750 award to further the work to ensuring a safe place for LGBT teens, ensuring that the LGBT teen community does not feel isolated and invisible, and providing advocacy on their behalf. Alyssa worked to bring the Day of Silence to Hillsborough High School, which spotlights the social invisibility that many LGBT teens face in their high school setting. Congratulations to Alyssa for this wonderful honor. The Hillsborough High School Middle School and Hillsborough Rescue Squad were presented with the American Heart Association 2015 New Jersey American Heart Saver Award on June 3rd for their efforts to help save lives. The two organizations were recognized for the efforts in educating the Township's middle school students in the rescue efforts needed to save the life of someone experiencing a cardiac emergency. Although not a required part of the school curriculum, the Hillsborough Middle School and Hillsborough Rescue Squad have partnered to provide hands-only CPR training to middle school students. Rescue Squad members have gone into the 7th grade health classes to teach CPR, utilizing mannequins purchased by the training center. To date, more than 200 students have been trained. Thank you and congratulations to the Hillsborough Middle School staff and the Hillsborough Rescue Squad on this recognition. Congratulations also goes out to Ms. Finnegan's second grade class from the 2014-2015 school year at Woods Road School. The class was recently awarded an honorable mention from the DuPont Challenge Science Writing Competition. The class, with assistance from Mrs. Fermato's Hillsborough High School biology class, worked collaboratively to create a healthy and nutritious snack recipe book to raise awareness during March National Nutrition Month. Congratulations to Ms. Finnegan and Ms. Fermato's class on their honorable mention. Although many people think that the summer months are quiet in our schools, that is definitely not the case. During the summer, we have several exceptional programs that provide our students with amazing enrichment and academic opportunities. During the weeks of July 6th and July 13th, we had two programs held at the middle school: the English Language Learner Summer Program and the Summer Enrichment Program. Approximately 130 of our district's ELL students participated in Hillsborough's 2-week-long ELL Summer Enrichment Program for students in kindergarten through 11th grade. The program is an academic and enrichment program that provides opportunities for students to continue their English acquisition during the summer time, both in the classroom as well as via local field trips. The program focuses on activities that many students who attend the program may not have access to, including a field trip to the Morse Museum, as well as in-house presentations on weather by the Franklin Institute. The district's annual summer enrichment programs give students in grades kindergarten through 8 the opportunity to spend a week learning something new or honing an already acquired skill. The district received over 500 registrations from Township students for the classes that ranged from cooking and cupcake wars to snap circuits, basketball, and photography, all taught by Hillsborough teachers. Students also had the opportunity to sign up for literacy and math add-on clubs. The program is something that many students look forward to every summer. At the high school, the district's Special Services Department is currently running the Extended School Year program. The program is attended by close to 240 students and is led by a staff of over 40 members of the Hillsborough High School team. We also have close to 140 volunteers that participate in this program. The goal of the program is to ensure that students in the district's self-contained classes will not experience any type of significant regression in skills during the prolonged summer break. This program runs from July 6th through August 14th. I want to extend a huge thank you to all the staff members and volunteers who make these 3 excellent programs available to our students every summer. And that's my report.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Schiff. Continuing on in the agenda, we have approval of minutes. So I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the June 22nd, 2015 executive session minutes.
So moved.
I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Abstentions for Greg. Okay, motion passes. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the June 22nd public session minutes. Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, motion passes.
Gotcha.
Okay, now we're going to move on to the committee reports. And I believe we had all 4 committees. So we'll start off with education. Mrs. Haas? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, let's start with Mr.
Yeah,
Gillette
we
with
can do-
operations.
Okay, so operations met last week. We had a long meeting, but not very many things discussed, just a lot of time spent on a few items. I'll try to go through them quick. I'll jump around a little bit, and I'm going to finish off with Mr. Samjian from Pret Samjian, our architect of record, who's here today in the audience, and he'll be able to answer questions. So just to dispense of a couple of quick ones, we discussed some HSA and Eagle Scout projects at our elementary schools. There was nothing controversial. There's a Gaga pit at Woods Road School, stage lighting at HES, playground curbing project at Aris, and there's another Eagle Scout project at Aris, which all of a sudden it slipped my mind what it is, but it was
Pavers.
some pavers, okay, behind the school. All right, so it's very simple. We just, very brief discussion. As with all our projects, the school district accepts donation and then facilitates the work to be done through our own process. We don't have anybody come and work in our schools or pay for things themselves. So that was easy. Also, we had Ms. Decker, our transportation supervisor, came in to talk about a couple of different issues. One was something that was on the agenda or was going to be on the agenda for last month. I did not attend last month. It's not on the agenda and won't be maybe until next year, and that is the possible purchase of additional district-owned school buses for athletic runs and field trips. She had a proposal that would save us some money by owning some buses ourselves or leasing and to own some buses rather than contracting. There's the competitive bidding market for these smaller contracts of athletic runs is really no competition anymore. We're really paying through the nose for these small runs. Be that as it may, we're not comfortable doing it at this time. We're going to have further discussion during the budget process. Maybe it's something we'll look at for next year. I'm only mentioning it because some board members did ask me personally about this issue and what we're doing about it. We don't need to worry about it for 6 months, probably. We put that towards the back burner. We also discussed with Ms. Decker the middle school issue with middle school students that are within walking distance to the school. We took a good look at that, and we're ready soon to provide or to talk about providing subscription busing to those students. I say soon because we are putting out a bid for those services. Of course, board members and public know that we're putting out a bid doesn't mean we have to sign the contract. We need to know the prices. So the purpose of the bid is to know what this would cost, and so we'll know what to charge parents for each student if they want to participate. We'd also have to, at that point, judge what the participation rate will be to know if it's even feasible. In other words, we need fairly full buses, whether it's one bus or two buses or three buses potentially, for it to work. It could be as much as, we talked about $700 per student, but it could be as low as $500. That's not low, I know, but as low as, take that with a grain of salt, depending on where the bids come back and how many students participate. After we talked about that, we talked about we're going to replace two mini buses. I don't know what you call those buses.
Yeah, they're mini, 24
the smaller school buses. This was in the budget, and now it's going forward. They're at their end of their useful life. Each has 185,000 miles on it, and it's just about The state actually puts a cap on how many years you can run a school bus. I think it's at like 12 years now. I think these are just at 11 plus years, plus the mileage, and they're falling apart. Okay, so then we talked about, this is the last thing I'll talk about today, about some projects, some capital projects. And we've been talking about two capital projects for many months now. One is the repaving of the middle school parking lot, and the other one is the refurbishing, almost replacement really, of the artificial turf football field at the high school. As reported here many months ago, and actually during our budget process from last spring, our initial estimates for the cost of those projects were something like $500,000 for the athletic turf field and about $800,000 for the middle school repaving. Our initial proposal to board members from the Operations Committee and from Dr. Schiff was that we would apply to the state after we passed a referendum to finance those projects. Actually, that's a little backwards, but what we do is we would look to receive debt service aid for those projects by taking a one-year note where we would wind up paying 60% of the cost of the projects, and through debt service aid, the state would pay 40% of the projects. That all sounded great when the projects were $800,000 and $500,000. Now the projects are potentially over $2 million combined. It could be less because there's some options for the turf field, but still, even the lesser option, the turf field is still maybe 50% more, or even more than originally estimated. So we don't exactly know what we'll do with the financing. But to move forward, you'll see on tonight's agenda, we have a resolution authorizing our architect to apply to the state as for a referendum for financing for these projects to see if we qualify for the debt service aid. It's very important to know whether we qualify for the debt service aid, so we'll know, we have to know that first before we can even have the referendum, before we know whether we want to do it. It's pretty certain that the parking lot qualifies. It's a bit of a toss-up about the turf field. Indications are that our athletic turf field would also qualify, but we need to see that from the state. So the resolution authorizes Pred Samjen to make that application for us and to go forward. We also talked about the timing of this. Those two projects need to be done in the summer of 2016. We need to have the referendum as soon as possible, but the earliest we can now have the referendum is in March of 2016, because to have a referendum in March of 2016, we need to have some paperwork in with one of the entities by September. To get that paperwork in by September, we need to have this application in now to the state so that we can get the other paperwork in by September, so then we can get the next. There's a whole timeline. I think that was included in some of the backup. I don't know if that went to the whole board. And the backup, Mr. Mumbu provided a timeline. So what it comes down to is if we're going to have a referendum, it needs to be done the referendum needs to be in March. So we have to get it started now. So we need to vote tonight to begin the application process. And as a add-on to that, the Operations Committee also recommended to allow concurrently Pred Samjen to begin work on the architectural and engineering, whatever they do, plan for the parking lot, because if we waited till the referendum passes in March to authorize them to begin their process, it would be too late to go out to bid. It just would be, time constraint would be too short. So since we're going to have the parking lot done regardless, if it's not this year, it's at some time, we will need to have the drawings and plans for the parking lot done. So Operations Committee recommends that we authorize them concurrently with this process to go ahead and begin that work also. And there's one little add-on to that before I ask if anyone has a question for Mr. Samjian. I also want to add there was one other project that we had contemplated doing, and we're still going to do, that is replacement of some of the unit ventilators at the Hillsborough Elementary School. This was originally part of the ESIP process. The ventilators, some of them are partially operational. I'll put it best. The rooms are still being heated, but we would have, if they actually functioned like they should, we could have more efficiency in heating them. So that's why it was originally part of the ESIP. We removed it from the ESIP because it wasn't a high priority item. During the budget time, we wanted some flexibility with the money that would be left over from not doing it. But now that we see the cost of the other projects being so high, we've asked Honeywell to put that back into the ESIP. And they agreed that, yes, they can put that back into the ESIP process. So they're going to do that, and we're going to get a report on that at the August Operations Committee meeting. Now, Tom, if any board members have a question for Mr. Samjian or anything about this topic, I think we do that now. Before
we can
continue.
do that now.
Okay.
Mrs. Haley.
So I have a question from Mr. Samjian, because how are you? I wasn't at the meeting. You have to understand that I'm in a really bad position here because I went to the taxpayers a few months ago and said, here's my estimates, and now everything's double. How does...
So for clarity, we'll talk about the turf first. The number that was shared is what we call a hard cost, meaning it's the actual construction estimate. Those numbers were secured from 2 different vendors that do what we call the carpet replacement. The drainage and everything else underneath seems to be in good shape. We're just talking about replacement of the turf. So that's the hard cost piece. What was not included in that first presentation was a contingency that the Department of Education requires us to carry, and what we call the soft costs, which are the creation of the application, the drawings to bid, and the administration during construction to oversee it. When we talked about the project initially, there was discussion about potentially doing it through a co-op, in which case the hard costs could potentially be limited to the numbers that were shared. Conversely, if you go out to bid, you might get better numbers because the co-ops have fixed pricing based on a process that they went through. So that's how the turf field project evolved. Does that answer that question? Okay. So let's go on to the other part, which is the parking lot. So the parking lot project, we put together some very preliminary sketches and some very preliminary estimates based on a request to have some order of magnitude. We did that, turned it around relatively quickly, and then ultimately started doing more due diligence because we knew once we get down the road, we need to be as accurate as we can be. Now, with that said, you have to understand oftentimes we're being asked to prepare estimates for work that's going to take place a year or 2 later, and that can be challenging. In this case, when we did our due diligence, some of the things that we found included 2 sets of drawings prepared by others for the original work at the middle school, so we were unsure which one was actually even implemented. Once we figured that out based on additional due diligence, we were able to ascertain the work that was completed prior and the modifications that we would recommend to address the issues. It's more than just drainage. We are talking about circulation through the parking lot for student drop-off, and we are talking about some additional things based on our more current findings. So that's how the numbers evolved. It's not that we are out to bid and now the estimates were off by a factor. It's about progressive due diligence, which typically happens in the early planning stages. We're asked for a very preliminary number to gauge as to where we are, and then we try to minimize the investment of time initially, but that based on the level of interest and the desire to address those projects, we want to dig as deep as we can to make sure we have as much information as possible, and that's how that progressed.
It's just so hard for me. It was hard for me to wrap my head around $800,000 for
Sure.
a parking lot, but almost $1.5 million. That's just, I can't even. wrap my head around that number.
And look, and I understand that, and I think part of what you have to understand is that the bids may result in lower numbers, certainly. Conversely, we're also factoring in some inflation, because if the referendum passes in March, as was shared, if we wait until the referendum to pass to start our drawings, then the window of opportunity will shrink. And so the numbers may be slightly higher, or we'll miss the summer window. So all these factors we're being asked to take into account to try to plan as best we can. Look, I understand it. The realities are that the cost of construction in prevailing wage projects that are primarily public sector projects is very high. That's just the reality of it. Some of the numbers we may not need to spend. For example, while the Department of Education requires that we carry a contingency, it's only needed if we find an unforeseen condition or to address anomalies in the bidding process or things like that. So there are things here that we have to use to plan, but may not necessarily be expending at the time of the actual bid, which is months and months away.
Yeah. And this is nothing against you, Greg, at all, but I, as a board member, right now, there's so many question marks in the air with numbers and what, the state may or may not give us, how much that's going to go to the taxpayers, who's going to be responsible for this, and my head hurts thinking about it. So right now, I understand you have a job to do, but I have a job to do too. I can't support going through this process right now. I don't even have the answers I want.
Look, I understand.
And it's nothing against you, but
No,
I
and I appreciate that. Look, again, we were asked, and it's typical, that when you're preparing for a construction project, there are steps that are taken, which are the steps we took. The steps are to start doing some due diligence, and then if the project if there is interest in pursuing the project, because again, there's no reason to spend any time, energy, or the board's money if the project even being contemplated is of no interest. When there's interest shown, then we want to make sure that we're presenting as much information as we can. The issue with the state, as was presented, we have a pretty good sense based on our experience, based on informal dialogue with the state, that the parking lot project is eligible for debt service aid in the amount of 40%. And the 40%, by the way, is for everything. It's hard costs and soft costs. The turf we've gotten mixed reaction on. And so my recommendation to the board, because I'm sure through Dr. Schiff and others on the administrative team, when you've interacted with the state, you'll oftentimes get mixed reactions and interactions. So we recommend that if you go through this process to get the application in, you will get a formal letter that says what is and is not eligible. At that point, you can make a decision on what to pursue and what not to pursue. You don't have to go to the voters for referendum. You don't have to pursue the projects if the response from the state is not as you expected it. But I would not suggest that we do anything until we get some guidance from the state in writing on which you can rely, because that certainly makes a difference relative to the 40% and whether they're going to fund the turf or the parking lot or both.
No, I understand. Thanks for your clarification, Greg. I appreciate it.
Any other questions?
Well, I just wanted to say, just let me add a couple of things real quick. I know there are community members that have been saying, why aren't we putting away and saving for the turf field? We know it has a 10-year life. Why aren't we saving? The truth is, we had a plan for that, and the plan was, at a minimum, to have enough in our capital reserve account to pay for the turf field. And this year we thought we'd have enough with debt service aid to pay for the turf field and the parking lot. In fact, if we didn't have the parking lot and the turf field was not as expensive as it's turning out to be, and we could probably do the turf field without any aid. We had a plan for the turf field. The problem is really twofold. The issues are really twofold. One is that it is going to cost much more than we thought. That's just the way it is. It's going to cost, each project is going to cost much more than we thought. And the second thing is, the middle school parking lot was something that I contemplated maybe, parking lots need to be done, but in a different year than we do the turf field. A couple of years from now, 3, 4, 5 years from now. But we had 2 very severe winters with a lot of ice, and they really did a number on that parking lot. Then we had a water main break through that parking lot, which did another number to it. It's bad luck that they both happened the same year. We're getting through. We're going to get through another whole school year with that parking lot. That's going to be tough. You know, I did some advanced training. I went to the Burger King drive-through today. If you've been through that, and so that pothole. You know what to expect in the middle school, but we'll get through it. And the turf field, we're going to get one more season out of it by spending some money, which was in our budget already, to, I think you said fluff it up. It was the exact correct terminology that you used at the meeting. So we're going to get through it. But it's just, they happen the same year. So now we have to keep our options open. We need to pass the resolution authorizing the work to be submitted, get it going, and we'll see what our options are.
Right, so Mrs. Haley, as you mentioned, there's still a lot of information that needs to be determined, and I agree with that. So we're waiting to find out as we close the books and do the audit how much excess surplus would be going to capital reserve, so we know what the total capital reserve is. The main question of whether or not each or both of these projects would qualify for the debt service aid. That's something that we need to get certainty around. So that's what this motion is. And then finally, the last part is what's the final cost going to have? So as our architect had done additional due diligence in terms of the parking lot and found that there were more issues than was the original cursory and the initial assessment, that's where that happens. So if we authorize our architect of record to start the work and do the plans, that way we can get final numbers on what the project's going to be and have that certainty. Mrs. Haas. Oh, sorry, Mrs. Haley.
I'm just concerned because who's to say that the bids aren't going to all of a sudden turn into 1.8 and 1.9? I mean, we went from, I'm a little worried.
Yeah, and with regard to both the application is that's the first step, and we get the ruling. We're not bound, we're not obligated to either go out to referendum, what amount, over what period of time. Again, as we communicated earlier during the budget process, is that our goal is to do this in a manner that doesn't add any additional tax burden on our community, and the state aid is a tool that we hope to be able to use to help pay a significant portion of it so that we don't have to go to the taxpayers. Mrs. Haas.
Yeah, in regard to saving taxpayers' money, I had raised at an earlier meeting whether or not the county would be willing to contribute anything to our turf field, as they have in other towns in Somerset County. Did anybody look into that?
I think we did.
Yeah, I did have a conversation with Bridgewater Superintendent about it, try to get an understanding of I think that particular field situation where it was using county open space funds in order to fund that. I think as we move forward with it, it's going to be something that our architect is going to need to take a look at if there are other ways to offset those particular costs. He wasn't definitive, and this is the process that we went through. It actually occurred prior to his arrival. But we can continue to reach out to our freeholders and see if they would be interested in supporting something like this. Our challenge is going to be, we have an existing field on a high school versus building a new field and the refurbishment of an existing field.
Would the county pay for a second field?
That I don't know. We can certainly ask.
What is the process for getting on their list of things that they would fund with the open space money?
We can contact the county administrator's office, and Mr. Mahmood can contact his colleague at the county office and kind of get a sense of what would be the next steps if that's even a viable option. The impression that I received was that it's kind of apples and oranges between how Bridgewater handled it and how the work that we need to do here, which is to refurbish an existing field. You bring up a kind of an out-of-the-box thought of what about another field? So, we'd have to really explore that and see what the implications of having a field that's not on our property or that's not proximal to the high school and transporting kids and those type of things. So I think that particular idea would require additional research, but I think just a question to our colleagues at the county level to see if there's even an option for some cost sharing or some other type of things is time well spent.
Well, just so you understand, every year they get an infusion of taxes, which include their open space tax, which I think is still 4%, which they get from every municipality in the county. Out of that money, they set aside 25% for development of open space. So the bottom line is every year, I'm sure they go through a process of millions of dollars worth of money that get allocated to many towns, including some towns that don't even have open space. Yep. So I think that if we get ourselves into that process, it's certainly something we should do before we go out and ask the public to, consider a referendum on these expenses. I'd also like to point out that the original turf field was privately fundraised. Has anybody looked into the possibility of the same people who graciously raised all the money for the original turf field, making at least some partial effort again this time? I think we still have space for some bricks. If people want to launch that campaign again, it was a very successful campaign. And there are a lot of people in our town who are very, very excited about having this turf field and perhaps would be willing to contribute, not to mention getting corporate sponsors or other kinds of sponsorships for this. I mean, that was the issue 10 years ago, and it was successful. So why not try it again? Yes, no?
Hey, Mr. Sumchin, you can share your thoughts and experiences with these type of things.
Sure. So, from a fundraising perspective, we've been involved with many turf projects where there was a foundation or a local sports organization that raised the funds to do the projects. In this case, I would offer to you that you're more likely to get them to help pay for 60% of the project than 100% of the project if you, in fact, get the state to contribute 40%. That does require you to borrow money because it is debt service aid. Grants are no longer available. So just if we're brainstorming, you could argue that if the project has to be done because of the concerns of the condition of the turf, then it has to be done. At that point, if you got approval from the state and they were going to contribute 40%, I would think to go to the group that raised money in the past or to those that support it to come up with 60% is absolutely a viable option. If the state comes back and says we're not going to fund 1 cent of the project, then we have to revisit the entire thought about how to fund the project, and that is certainly a viable option as well. We have seen counties contribute some money. That's something that we're not overly involved with because it's an administrative to administrative discussion that takes place. To your point, how much money gets allocated and what are the limitations placed on the field if you get open space money? Does that mean that anybody in the county can come and use it, or is it a public space because now you're using open space money to fund it? I know that that sometimes is a limitation that oftentimes boards or communities don't want because all of a sudden now they've got anybody has the right to use it. So there are some logistics that would have to be worked out, but certainly those are very viable options to helping fund the project.
Okay, well, I hope we'll look into that. And by the way, in the comments here, we were talking about the labor costs. One of the things that happened 10 years or 11 years ago when it was originally built was community members actually did a lot of the under the turf work. We do have a large farm community. I guess we have the equipment and whatever. So another option to look into to save money might be to involve people from our community to research. I don't know the terminology, but if there's some leveling that needs to be done that was sort of done by our community in the first place. Once in a while, it pays to be around for a while. I have also a question about the parking lot. Would there be any advantage in putting solar above a new parking lot at the middle school? I've noticed around the county there are a lot of parking lots that do have solar on top of it. I don't know if it's economic anymore, but I would think the time to do it, if it's ever going to be done, would be when the parking lot's being redone and might recoup some of the expense.
Sure. So I can tell you the pros and cons of what are called carports. Solar in and of itself takes a long time. The return on investment is pretty significant. And so if you were just going to go out and fund solar by yourself, generally speaking, when you ran the numbers, it would not necessarily be economically viable. My recollection is that solar also is possible for debt service aid. I don't know if that's still the case. This is the first time we're really talking about that, so we would want to go research that and find it out. But historically, my recollection is that solar was eligible for debt service aid, which means that 40% of solar would be paid for if, in fact, we confirm that they would still fund solar. Again, in the spirit of clear communication, because that's one of the things I'm supposed to be improving on, I want to make sure that I don't know if solar is, in fact, still being funded by debt service aid. Historically, I do remember that it was. Now, so the advantages are that if you did carports and you added solar, that you will certainly start to see some savings on the electrical bills because you would directly connect those panels into the building. Some of the challenges that we've experienced over the course of the last few years, especially with carports, are the fact that snow builds up on them, snow does melt, and eventually what happens is you've got issues with people getting snow falling on them or cars getting damaged. So not to mention the aesthetics of what is now a relatively open parking lot, having these solar panels now appear in the parking lot, and some will define them as unpleasant, and others would be perhaps less critical of them. But that is something that you need to be conscious of because the aesthetics in front of a school are oftentimes remembered as they are today, and the solar gives it a very, very different look. So there are pros and cons to those. If it's the desire of the board, we can certainly research that as well. But
yeah, we actually considered having solar as part of the ESIP process, and because of the long period of time for being payoff, it wasn't economically viable. So that was not included in the ESIP project. So.
On the other hand, if it makes the project more eligible for state funds and the state will pay for 40% of it, then you immediately get 40% of a return on your investment on the solar. Or am I wrong?
No. I mean, when we were talking about the ESIP, you were talking about taking savings and paying for it. So in this respect, you get ahead of the curve where the return on investment does look greater. Obviously, the cost will increase because you have to pay for the solar. There are also some other private public partnerships that are called PPAs, that basically a private company will come in, fund the solar project. They will use your real estate to implement it, and then they will proportionally share some of the savings with you. They're a little more challenging because you don't have the benefit of a tax write-off. A private corporation does. That's part of the incentive that they have. We've done projects like that as well. And again, it's something that can be discussed, but it too can be very challenging.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And I have one more question, which is really for the board, but thank you for your very good answers to my previous questions. You're talking about doing a referendum March 8th.
7th, 8th?
March puts us smack in the middle of our regular budget process, as in we have to vote on our regular budget by the end of that month. So what happens to these projects if the referendum does not pass? Assuming, everything goes well with the state and, it does get to the point of being on a ballot and an election takes place and it doesn't pass, what happens to those projects? They clearly, I think, would be too late to inject into a budget that would have been formulated without them. So therefore, does that mean it gets automatically pushed back several years?
Well, I think a lot depends on the deposit that we can make into the capital reserve account next month, which we don't know what that will be yet, and the anticipated deposit we can make next year. Since this is all the way goes through the end of next August, that's potentially a second. If we can get an early heads up on the second deposit next year too, I think with a failed referendum on both projects, I think that we could still do one of the projects, just pay for the costs up front without borrowing any money. These are all hypotheticals. We'll have to see.
Good one,
but we did ask.
Something we got to think about.
We did ask if a referendum fails, are we prevented from doing the project? Is the referendum on the project or is it on the loan? The referendum is on...
The referendum is on the loan.
Right.
The community is authorizing you to borrow money to fund that project. If a referendum fails, but the board decides that the health and safety of the community is still needs to address one or both of these projects, and you, through budgeting and other means, find the money to do it, or fundraising, find the money to do it. Just because the referendum fails does not prevent you from doing the project, financing it a different way. The referendum is really a funding mechanism. It's funding the projects that were identified, but if the board feels that there's a health or safety issue, and normally the reason that you have referendums is because the amount of money you're talking about can't be funded. When you talk about building projects and things like that, the state only allowed districts to fund up to 5 years historically. And so when you were talking about a big building project, the referendums, you're talking about funding for 20 years. That's not the case here, but these are funding mechanisms, and the project, if you save in capital over the course of years, project can be done.
So this is what we do. We would fund the turf field because kids play on it, and it needs to be done, and we would fill potholes at the middle school until such time as we can come up with the funds to do it right. I mean, that's just off the top of my head how we would do it. This, but it doesn't have to be a calamity. There's just some challenges. It's not a calamity. It's just challenges, and we'll work through them. The timing is a little bit strange, but we get this passed in March, and then go straight from there right into a regular discussion of the budget.
Right. And first, let's I don't want to get way too ahead of ourselves. Let's first get the answer to which of these. I said let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, and let's first get the answer as to which or both of those projects would qualify for debt service aid, and then from there, and while that application is in process, we have to go through those different scenarios and state what we would plan to do.
Yeah, I mean, it'll just be leaving our regular process sort of out there with 2 weeks to go and trying to figure all these things out. I don't view it as a calamity either, but I certainly think the contingencies should be considered, because I'm not so sure that this board's prepared to turn around after a referendum that potentially turns this down and say, well, the public has spoken, now we're going to do the opposite. So, for reasons other than financing, I'm not sure that.
Well, we could cancel the football season.
Whatever.
Well, it's not just that, but Greg, I mean,
what do you do?
Greg, you've been in town long enough to know Hillsborough is not necessarily referendum friendly.
No,
so I
no.
think that Mr. Mahmood
but
and
we're-
Dr.
but
Schiff
they're football
should be
friendly.
prepared for
They're
a
football
failure.
friendly.
We're not necessarily referendum friendly here in town.
No, I know, but they'll we'll have to have football.
So I just want to clarify, because I think there's a lot of concern. I mean, it's a lot of money, more than we expected. What we're asking for tonight is just to find out if the state will fund the projects. Should we go to referendum?
There are two things. One is to authorize our architect to make the submission to find out to the state to confirm which or both of the projects would qualify for debt service aid, and then also to authorize our architect to start making the engineering design and drawings for the parking lot, so that those will be finalized and then also could be bid upon shortly after the referendum would be voted on. So that way you can get quotes in March as opposed to starting the drawings in March and then getting quotes in the May timeframe, where it gets much more difficult. And also the bidding process, you're late in the bidding process, so the bids are more likely to be higher than if you get an early start.
And I get that.
Also, Gina, also just not to interrupt, but just so the board and you understand, the architect's fee for this is gets, when the referendum passes, that gets rolled in to the financing also.
Correct.
Ready for it qualifies for the 60% also. Sorry, go ahead.
No, but I understand that part. So I guess what I just want to clarify is we're going to start the process, but if we choose not to go out to referendum, we don't have to.
That's correct. We have
That's
the
what I want to
option
clarify, is that
of not pursuing.
The point of this is just to ask what'll be covered, should we go down that road?
Yes.
And if we choose to, as a board, say no, we can't, we still have that option.
That's correct.
That's really what I need to know.
Yep.
You are making a financial commitment to prepare the application, and to clarify, you are 100% right. If the state comes back and says we're funding all of it or none of it, you can still say, okay, thanks for that information, we've chosen not to go to referendum. It's the only way you can get your money. It's debt service aid because grants are no longer available. You may be familiar, or a grant they would give you cash. If you have to borrow the money, that's the only way they're proportionally funding it. The second part of that is if you choose to have us develop the detailed drawings for actual bidding concurrently with the application process, that's a financial commitment separate from the applications. And what we shared with the operations committee is those drawings have a shelf life. So if the board intends to do the project this summer or next summer or the summer after that, the commitment and financial commitment you made to prepare those engineering, detailed architectural engineering drawings, they will be there until you are ready to proceed with the project. So that's just the clarification of those 2 points. Because the application process is much simpler, and they only need a very schematic drawing for approval. But the concern was that if we wait, which is the normal process, a referendum, you would do the application, wait for the response, and then in March, if the referendum were successful, we'd start drawing preparation. We would miss the window to really get competitive pricing, and probably this summer. That was the challenge that we talked about at the operations committee. That's why this other option is being considered.
Okay. Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. First comment, I'd like to, or question, you had mentioned that the 1.5, there may be a lower number between 800,000 and, which was the original talked about number, and the 1.5 million. So if we go to RFP, get a bid, how much lower than 1.5 can we hope for?
Well, look, you have to separate the numbers that we're talking about, because in that 1.5, there is a professional fee, and as we've always committed, that number will be locked in. It's a fixed number. That number won't change up or down. Then you have the contingency and the soft costs and things like permitting and other stuff. I can tell you when we've bid projects, we've had well over $1 million range between the low bidder and the high bidder. I wish I could tell you with any level of certainty how the prevailing wage market plays out, but you can literally have people looking at our exact same drawing.
That's why I just needed to know. You can't tell me.
It's unbelievable. I mean, people looking at the same drawing.
I get it. Let me ask you something regarding the parking lot. And we all know, especially sitting in the operations committee, there is no if, and, buts. It needs to be taken care of, as opposed to patching, but just getting it done to get it correct, to fix it, but not give us a platinum answer, but somewhere between a bronze and a silver. Do we have to go with the bells and whistles? Is there a minimum to fix it and get what we need out of this to continue on and service our parents?
I understand the question, and I assure you that we're not coming to you with a platinum answer. This is about a utilitarian project, right? It doesn't need to look pretty. It needs to be safe. It needs to be functional. It needs to circulate well. You don't want ice to be damming up in the corner from runoff. And so while I'm sure we could do less drainage than we're proposing, then I'll be here in front of you at some point in the future being criticized that we still have ponding, people are still slipping and falling, and it's a challenge. So
I'm just trying to take your word for it that what you're providing, what we're discussing, because some of us aren't in on all the fine details, that we're not getting something more than we really need, just to continue doing what we're doing.
We're making improvements.
For the record.
Yeah, we're making improvements to include, I mean, when you say not getting something we don't need,
well,
we're making an improvement to the student drop-off area as well. Right. There was safety about kids running across, and so we're addressing that as well. Technically, that has nothing to do with the repair of the parking lot.
No, I get that.
Do you need that? That's for you to say.
I want that on the record.
Me too.
Okay, thank you. The third thing I wanted to talk about, and that's not for you, but comments were made, so I need to address them, regarding the years back and the community activity that was launched and successful in the brick campaign. You're not going to get that this year. You're not going to get that next year. Those forces, those dynamics do not exist. It won't exist. There's maybe some public support for helping us, but nowhere near anywhere near the numbers that existed last time. It won't happen. Those people are not around, and they're not going to come back and help. I can tell you that for a fact, because I've talked to these people. There's no interest. Insofar as the county, I want it for the record that as far as comments made about money coming back to the township regarding our county taxes and the open space fund, this township gets millions of dollars for open space. Sarah Land Preservation is funded by the county, and that money comes to the township and has preserved many acres, many hundreds of acres, as Kaz is well aware. He sat through many planning board meetings where we've approved these things. So it's not as if, and I want that for the record, it's not as if Hillsborough does not get its fair share of open space money. All right, so if we start going back to the county asking for additional type funds for a football field, that's a real stretch and a special request, and opens the door for other towns to do the same thing. And I can tell you that there's not a lot of desire for that door to be opened up. We can try, but I'm just, let's try to stay within reality. What we know we can try to go after, what is potentially better than a 50% chance, and let's stop working and talking about pipe dreams, okay?
Yeah, Steve, it was my understanding that towns, as Mrs. Haas mentioned, that had no open space or any open space left, had like an exception made where like they said, well, went to the county and said, well, why don't we ever get any open space tax money back? And that, well, you know what we'll do? We can build an athletic field for you because you have no open space, so that's how to use it. Other towns that have open space, you get your county open space money for open space, not for that. So that's the best way to understand it. Before I forget, and this might close up, Mr. Samjian, I forgot to mention one thing, not on your topic, but just really quickly. We had a discussion with Ms. Mahoney, who's our buildings and grounds supervisor, and about substitute custodians. Didn't want to forget to mention this. We're having a difficult time keeping substitute custodians in Hillsborough. They're being paid about 50%, not 50% less. I can't do the math. 33% less. Well, they need to be paid 50% more hourly to have a reasonable chance of coming here when we call, and not to Bridgewater, who's paying $13.50 an hour, where we're paying $9.50 an hour. So our recommendation, $9.35. So our recommendation for Operations Committee, I think that's on tonight's agenda. No. Oh, it's not on the agenda.
Just recommend it for the.
But it's a recommendation, is to raise the hourly rate for the substitute custodians to match the Bridgewater rate of $13.50 an hour. Of course, we have some substitute custodians that are loyal to Hillsborough, so they'll be getting a nice perk, but there aren't too many of those. This is to attract the ones that do not come to Hillsborough because they'll pick up the phone for anybody else but us. I just wanted to make sure I got that.
Okay.
Now, if we're
all right, thank
go
you.
with operations,
thank you, Mr. Gillette,
for
for completing the committee report. And I think we have all the questions and discussion with regard to the capital projects and the referendum and the recommendation from the Operations Committee.
I know the resolution.
Oh, Dr. Swan.
One more question. It's my understanding that the current student drop-off for middle school students is actually at Triangle School. So is that going to change? I noticed the plan was now to have a student drop-off area at the middle school. Now, while parents might not be using it, I still think it's a safer option. And unless your child is weighed down with things, I always made my kids get dropped off over there. But
Dr. Susan, I wasn't trying to comment on the drop-off.
No, but I would
was
like to
looking
know
forward-
if that's in the
I wanted
plan
to
and
make
if
sure
our
there was
and if
no
our
fancy
architect is aware of
landscaping
that.
thrown in and Belgian block and all other fancy stuff
Right,
that we,
no.
I want a basic functional driveway.
All right, we have an answer for you. Mr. Mahmood.
Ms. Wasson, we did spend hours with the engineers, with Mr. Somjan's group, with Dr. Chabolsky, and the plan is to do the drop-offs on site. So it would change, and we would keep safety in mind. When we get a little closer, we'll be able to share the drawings and what we've established. But this was something that was talked about through many hours of discussion. So it would enhance the pickups and drop-offs at the middle school, not Triangle, locally at the school, with safety being the number one priority. So this project would really it'd make it a lot safer, a lot quicker, a lot smoother. There'd be different egress in and out of the school, so it wasn't that one entrance anymore. So we really would have buttoned up what I feel is failing right now as far as the pickups and drop-offs, and I think it'd be better for the students and for the staff that it's done this way. But I think we'll have a chance soon to be able to discuss the actual pictures with the full board so you can see exactly what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
I know the resolution is later.
Yes.
So I'm home from vacation in a few hours, and I left my family, jumped in the shower, and came here. Do you need me to stay until the actual resolution is read for further questions?
No, I think we're good.
Can I be dismissed?
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Get back to your family.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the Operations Committee report. Okay. HR?
Okay, mine is about 5 seconds compared to that. We didn't discuss too much, but we did discuss the need for an increased lunch aid at Amsterdam due to enrollment at the school. We discussed the need for extra period Chinese at Arton Road due to increased enrollment in the language arts for Chinese this year. And then the majority of what we discussed was personnel matter that isn't up for discussion publicly yet.
Thank you. Questions? Education? Mrs. Haas.
Dina, you are so lucky. You do the best reports. Anyway, the Education Committee met on July 21st. We discussed some new and interesting things, including instructional rounds and collaboration with the Panasonic Foundation. This is a new concept for administrative professional development. And if you think about it, most teachers and administrators don't get the opportunity to watch other administrators and teachers because they're doing their job. Well, this is modeled after medical instructional rounds where, for professional development purposes, people actually go around and look at other people in their same category and learn from them by observing. And Dr. Antunes and two of our staff principals participated with this a few years ago and found it to be an excellent experience. So we're recommending to move forward with that for an additional, for this year with 3 schools participating in the first year. So that is on the calendar. We also discussed hiring Dr. Ivory for the strategic plan and obviously approved that. We also discussed enrollment projections. And one of the things that we noticed was that TP enrollment was very low for this coming year, where there were 7, 9, and 12 students in each section. So we discussed the possibility of merging some of those classes, but it was felt that it may be too late in the summer to make this change for this year. But we will certainly have further discussions about guidelines for minimum class sizes for next school year. We had a large discussion on math placement tests. This is something that concerns many, many parents and was really raised very strongly by Dr. Wasson. Basically, based on your math placement in 5th and 6th grade may determine where you end up at the end of high school graduation, because your math placement invariably impacts what science classes you're able to take in order to have the proper background to succeed in those science classes. So basically, a couple of things were explained to us in terms of what the standards are Basically, once a student is in CP and wishes to go into the honors classes in the high school, they're required to have a 95% or better in all 4 marking periods. There are other, once a student is in honors, the student has to have an 84% or better for the year to move forward into the next honors classes. Prior to high school, there's a matrix where students are placed into advanced math. These were based in the past on NJS scores, common and unit assessments, midterms, and teacher recommendations. So we basically felt very strongly that it's important that parents understand the path towards honor classes at the high school actually begins in 5th grade. And, you know, more communication that we feel is necessary so that people understand the process. One of my favorite reports from this meeting was on the Summer English Language Learners Program and ESY program. Enrique Pinque provided an overview of the ELL program for the summer. Our ELL numbers have extremely increased. Last year we had 2 years ago we had 120 students. Now we have 180 students. And many of them are in the free lunch or reduced lunch program. So this ELL program during the summer provides them with an enrichment program that starts with math and English, but also provides activities that they may not otherwise have access to. This year they went to the Franklin Institute presentation on weather. They had a presentation from a nutritionist from ShopRite on healthy food. They played various geography games and went to the Morris Museum, and 130 students registered for this program. So I'm very proud and very appreciative to Mr. Pinque and all the teachers who are involved in this program, because I really think it helps our kids. Kathy Warlick also gave us an update on the extended school year program, which started this year with 200 students, 40 staff members, and over 140 volunteers, for which we thank all the people who volunteer. And most of the classes ran from Monday through Thursday. The autism program also includes Friday. And the purpose of this program is to make sure that students show up for school in September without having lost any of the skills that they had gained by June of the previous year. And this program is funded through our budget as well as IDEA funds. So we're very, very happy about these programs and thank our staff for making it better for all our kids. That's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Haas. Any questions with regard to the Education Committee report? Okay. Governance Committee met Monday, July 13th. Items that they reviewed had to deal with the strategic planning and the facilitator. So there were 2 leading candidates. The committee had developed a rubric which looked at multiple factors, and then it also included references that each of the board committee members made to superintendents and board members who had used each of those 2 candidates. And then when we put the assessments down against the rubric, Dr. Ivory's organization won out, so there was the committee recommended, and you'll see it on the action agenda. We had talked about board self-evaluation, so I contacted Gwen Thornton, our NJ School Board Association representative. You'll get the email soon, so that way you can go online, and we'll give ourselves both the self-assessment for the board and then also for the superintendent's evaluation. And then we'll proceed with those at a later date in terms of all the summary like we do on an annual basis. And that was it from the Governance Committee. Any questions? Okay. All right, that summarizes the committee reports. Now we'll open it up to the floor for comments from the public. And this is with regard to what's been presented and also on the action agenda. We see a line. Great. Come on up. Name and address, please.
Hi again.
Hi.
My name is Casey. I live in 1003 Washington Common, and I'm here for the 3rd time coming to you because Actually, I'm shaking because I'm so upset, because I feel like we've presented our concerns and I feel like they've been quickly dismissed. I would like to hear from the the Director of Operations and ask him what other solutions were talked about as far as like getting busing for our children for the middle school, other than just making us pay for our bus.
Well, I could talk about a little bit more about the discussion we had with Ms. Decker when she presented to us. She addressed many of our questions, including buses that pass, going to the middle school that pass near the area, if those buses were full. She indicated that yes, those buses had at least 46 students per bus, which we would consider full, meaning there were maybe 4 or 5 seats. Mr. Moomin, I'm looking over for you for confirmation because I'm not an expert on transportation. I'm beginning to be. So we looked at that concern. She also had some discussion with or attended something with state representatives in the transportation area. She came back to us with some information and some definitions. And one is that, and I have to start remembering this because I actually made the mistake when I was reporting earlier. I just realized it. I said students within walking distance, but really walking has nothing to do with this process. The school district is obligated to provide transportation for students according to our policy, and that students that live within a certain distance or further than a certain distance from the school. But we don't actually mandate anyone to walk. It just means transportation will not be provided. That sounds harsh, I know, but we know that no one winds up, very few children wind up walking in these situations. They usually have transportation as provided by a parent. That's just the way it works out. There's not a lot of community interest in providing busing, in extending busing to students that aren't currently provided with busing. There's not, I don't hear any board support for it, and from my speaking with the greater community, there's not, I don't believe there's community support for it. We tried to look at solutions.
In terms of funding, we had talked about this. 3 buses, which is 140 students, so you say that's roughly about $120,000 to $160,000. If the district was going to pay for that out of this year's budget, we would have to find a place to cut. And so that would either mean a number of teachers that would have to be reduced, class sizes would have to go up, there'd have to be other programs that would have to be shut down. And based on the budget process that we went through, we weren't able to make those priorities so that we can provide buses to students that we hadn't provided busing in years past.
Now, is it possible to get the number of buses that do go to Hillsborough Middle School and the exact count on each? Because I find it hard to believe that there's 46 children on each of those buses that attend the middle school. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can absolutely obtain those numbers. Also, the buses, there is a timeline for these. We're on a 3-tiered efficiency system, so the idea that we would stop every bus that's in and out of the developments would be almost feasibly impossible for us to get our kids on time with a 3-tiered system. So what we'll get you that number is certainly public information, but after speaking to our transportation expert, that would be an impossible task to be able to break up our tiers, put 4 or 5 students on one bus, another bus, just wouldn't be feasible.
Have you looked at making that radius from 2 miles maybe to 1 mile and address the furthest students out and accommodating some and addressing the policy of 2 miles and narrowing that? Because I think 2 miles or 1.5 miles is quite a distance. And no one's given me really assurance that my daughter will get to school safely and that someone will be watching her.
We can certainly take a look at that, but I don't know that the board talked about the haves and the have-nots and breaking up the 140 that way. So that would be something that the board would have to decide on.
Well, I'm not sure I follow you.
She's saying to take a portion of the 140 closest to 1 mile and see if we can bus those children as opposed to busing
the furthest children out in that 2 mile radius.
I don't.
I don't even know if it's
Look,
feasible.
let me say this. I didn't want to give the impression that we didn't bang our heads together a lot and try to come up with something. I threw out all kinds of possible solutions because I have 2 children, and I know
And have
what
they
it's
walked
like
2 miles to school?
No, they don't. They
And how
live
do you
within
feel
a
about
distance
that
where they're bused.
personally?
They live with it, but that's just the vagaries of, you know, I've been here for 25 years. That's just where
I
where
grew
live.
up in Hillsborough.
Okay, listen. I had all kinds of ideas. I said, can it be cheaper by having one bus do 2 runs? They're close enough to the school. Well, can we contract, do a bid out for a bus to go back and forth twice? How long can it possibly take? But I hit all kinds of roadblocks, like you have. I've hit roadblocks too. Is it, oh no, you can't. You can't drop off kids at the middle school 25 minutes before school starts. That's too early. We won't allow it.
But I heard we can drop off the kids at...
I can't go anything because as soon as I start down this path, some administrator is going to tell me that I'm throwing them under the bus and I'm going to have a potential ethics charge against me because I'm telling you that I've got, that I'm hitting roadblocks when I'm trying to work for you too. I'm trying to work for you, but there's no solution here. There's no solution. The solution is one you're not going to like, and it's going to be several $100s per student for subscription busing.
Well, I think this is something that I'm going to be here constantly. I have 2 children, so the next 4 years this is going to be an issue for me. And I will continue to come and fight for this because I think, you know, when you toss around $800,000 and $1.6 million, you know, for turf and, you know, I think $160,000, you know, that's something that we can figure out if need be. But I think this still needs to be readdressed and, you know, bring people from the outside, talk to different districts, you know, see how they work this out because I'm not comfortable with you telling me that my daughter has to walk alone to school 1.5 miles, and it's unacceptable.
I understand how you feel. We've worked around the edges. Almost all the work that we do, when we put together the budget, is minuscule compared to the total amount that we spend.
Right.
We argue about a percentage, a slice of the pie. Everything else is nearly fixed. So when you say 180,000 is nothing,
I'm not saying it's nothing, but compared to
$1.6
$1.6 million.
Okay,
It's huge, okay? I understand, I empathize with you, but it's not nothing. Trust me, and it's very difficult to shoehorn that savings.
Okay. Well, to that, when you tell me that I have to spend an additional $500 to $800 a year for a single mom to bus my kids for the next 4 years, that's not an easy thing to come up with either in my budget.
Yes.
It's not.
There are some numbers out there, Mr. Mahmood. I think students that go to non-public schools, which we are required to either provide transportation or provide aid in lieu. And aid in lieu is what we give to, how much do we, what is the yearly aid in lieu?
$884.
So $884 is what the state tells us nominally it costs to put one child on one bus for a trip of this type. That's not tiered in our system. That would have to be a specialized bus going to a place to pick up a child. So $884 is like the nominal amount.
And again, with adding bus service, that would have to happen in the next budget cycle, and we would have to make prioritizations in terms of where we want to cut. And we have, we can only grow our budget, the municipal piece of it, by 2% per year. And so we would have to make those decisions on where we want to prioritize and where we want to cut in order to provide busing to people that are within this. And it would be courtesy busing that we would provide to people who are within that range. That's stipulated by the state.
Okay. Well, I'd be interested in the numbers as far as the bus capacities. Where would I get that information, and who would I contact?
So he'll find out. He'll let you know what the subscription rate is in terms of how many students are subscribed on each bus.
No, I don't want to know. Well, yeah, the ones that are currently scheduled to be on a bus. I'd like to know the numbers of each bus to go to the middle school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, James Becks, 2405 Jamestown Common. I just want to understand really quickly for the subscription busing. We haven't come up with a number yet. Is that that's only for the 140 who are currently not getting busing, or is that for everyone within 2 miles?
That would be, so as I understand it, we're getting bids on 1 bus, 2 buses, and 3 buses for the number of 140 people who are considered walkers, but for whom we do not provide bus service. And it's a 2-step process. So depending on how many people are interested in doing it, we would size the bus accordingly. And there would be a minimum number. So let's say we could get 40 students who are willing to subscribe. Then it would be the cost of that one route divided by 40. If you get 50, I don't know how much a bus holds.
54.
So if you get 54, then the per unit cost, per student cost would come down accordingly.
Okay, so
and there would have to be a commitment. You would have to pay at the beginning of the year, so that.
And I understand all the issue with the next budget cycle, and obviously we don't want other things to be cut. But so we're not talking about all the people within 2 miles. We're talking about only the 140. Just so we understand that there are people within the 2 mile range. We're still going to be getting the free busing that we're not afforded, even though we would live within the same 2 miles.
Just to be clear, the requirements or the stipulations with regard to what the state says a student who the district is required to provide busing for versus those students that the state does not require a district to do. It's a combination of distance, but then also if there are certain routes in which it becomes unsafe for the students. So, for example, Amwell Road, it's a busy road. That in partnership with the police department, they said any walking route that would cross Amwell Road, we would be obligated to provide busing service for people who go to the high school or to go to the other ones. So you have, or if it's a 4-lane road. So, for example, Lawton Road is 4 lanes. Triangle Road is 4 lanes. So that's why, people who are on the other side of Triangle Road, they get bused, whereas people on the same side as Triangle School or HMS don't meet that criteria.
Right. But if you don't actually have to cross that road, how does that play into that? So if you're walking, you don't actually have to cross Triangle or cross Aughton Road.
If you don't,
how does I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, we've talked about this before, but the determination to what's a safe road and what's not, and what's a safe route and what's not, just seems kind of arbitrary. And we've never thought to relook at that as to why we would determine one route as unsafe and as.
My understanding is if it's a 4-lane road, if it's a speed limit that's higher than 35, so 40 miles per hour or higher, and if there is not a sidewalk that's available. Those are the criteria that basically calls it a hazardous route. So if you live within 2 miles and there's just 2-lane roads that are 35 miles per hour or less, and there's a sidewalk, then according to the state, the district is not obligated to provide bus service to those students.
What are the odds that this could be budgeted for the following year? I know that Bridgewater buses everybody. I'm pretty sure Montgomery buses everyone. Flemington, they all get bused to the middle school. No.
I personally don't see that happening.
It's like I said, it's going to be difficult.
So I just wonder how we're so different from those towns. If they seem to be able to figure that out, why we haven't.
I would probably say is that when the districts were first started, they probably built it in from the very beginning and then continued it. Whereas the situation here is we've had in your area where we have a history of not providing busing service or incurring those costs. Now it's an additional cost where we're doing it. So
it's a short history. It's a relatively short history of not providing busing, is it not?
I believe that we have not provided busing in your area. I want to say ever.
Okay. Well, so for example, the people on Fleming Drive, they all of a sudden have busing now. I know we discussed the 4 lanes and the sidewalks and all
right.
that, but it's just a tough thing to wrap. So and you were the
So I just
gentleman was
wanna-
talking
I just
about
wanna-
100, it was $884 was the cost given per student. Are we going to be given any sort of rebate? So if that's actually the cost, do we get some sort of rebate so that we can help to pay for the subscription busing in the event that we're able to actually even get to subscription busing? Because, we pay the same ratables as everybody else, and we don't receive the same benefits.
I
So it just
understand
seems
your
a little-
argument with regard to the ratables and the taxes that you pay.
Is there any way to petition relief of the ability to make this subscription busing for everybody? Because when you think about it, if you were actually to look at who, what students cost the most money to bus, it's actually the people who are further away.
No, we have a state mandated requirement to provide busing for those students.
I understand, but I mean, as far as cost per student, it costs a heck of a lot more to bus, I would think, somebody who lives way up on the mountain than it would for somebody a mile away.
Okay. All right. I appreciate your feedback, and we're starting to get into a discussion about trying to come up with a solution, and that's not the purpose of this.
So in other words, we're never going to get busing then?
Unless we are willing to make prioritization and make cuts elsewhere in the budget, or else if we get a growth in one year, we get state aid that was unexpected, and we feel that that's a good place to put it. That's where it is. It becomes a choice where we have to choose: do we provide busing to students who we haven't provided busing before, or if we do other programs to better the education of the students that throughout the entire district.
Okay. And we'll take into consideration the academic disadvantage to the students who don't get bused when they walk to school in the rain before testing. That, as the woman was saying, that does affect their future education throughout the high school. Would that be?
I appreciate your feedback.
Okay.
And
I just have one question though.
Sure.
The other day, I was at a baseball game with my son, and the mother of another son who was also on the team was looking at the minutes, and she had brought up to my wife something about a teacher who was going on a maternity leave. It's not really important, but it was interesting that she didn't mention anything about the busing issue, that we had been here, because this is my fourth time actually here talking about it, and we've spoken for a considerable amount of time. Is there any particular reason why a concern of this, when we've had more people here and talk for longer, is not represented in the minutes at all? I understand it's on the videotape, but I've seen the minutes for the last three board meetings. No, actually, the first two. The last one, they're not up. I was looking this afternoon. Is there any reason why it's not noted at all in the board meeting minutes that there has been a concern about the busing issue? And I noticed it does mention that people have written letters, but if someone was actually looking at the minutes to find out what's been going on at the board meetings, there would be no mention of this.
Our board secretary will answer that question.
Thank you for the question. First, this video is always on YouTube, so there is a live stream of this,
I've
so
been
people
told,
can
yes.
absolutely see that. The board is completely transparent. The minutes are not verbatim, so they are my minutes, and I have no obligation to provide a verbatim minute book. That would take the board forever. It'd take up a lot of space. Since we have this accessible to the community via YouTube and people can access it, certainly this issue is of a big concern to you. We are not looking to diminish your value, and that's why we have it available on YouTube. It is also streamed on a cable channel, so I believe that there's complete transparency on the board's part. As far as the minutes are concerned, we believe they're accurate and reflective, and there's no hiding anything here, if that's the insinuating factor here. We are very transparent, and we're very concerned about your concern that you brought to the board several times, so we do appreciate that.
Mr. Mahmood, I'm reading the minutes right now, and I see 1, 2, 3, 4 people that it's reflected in the minutes, and you're one of them.
It is reflected in the minutes?
Jim, you're reflected. I know your name. I know who you are.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to see that, because when I look online, I don't see that.
There, Michael's name's there. Debbie's name is there. It's all right there.
And you're looking at the minutes that
I'm
are
looking at the
posted
minutes,
online?
June 22nd, that are online.
We're not hiding anything.
Right.
No.
Oh,
Oh,
they-
they're not online yet.
They're
The
not
June
online
26th
They're not
yet.
online
We
yet.
just
those
approved them.
tonight.
We approved.
Okay,
So they'll
but
be
nothing
available.
from the two prior meetings?
We haven't had a meeting since, obviously, you know, we haven't had
Right.
a meeting since June 22nd. We just approved the minutes. We're about
Okay.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Elaine Nascimento. I live on 616 Cornwall Court. I just would like to understand why Fleming driving gets bused to the middle school. They don't have to cross any streets over 35 miles per hour. So I get confused how you decided, because I believe last year was their first time getting the bus to go to the middle school. So how did you decide?
I believe we did explain that. It's a very good question, and I understand how that can be a concern. The other side, that Fleming Drive, I think the speed limit was, it's a higher range of speed limit. People travel faster. There's more lanes. So there was a determination that from a safety perspective, that side was absolutely more critical than the other side of the development. And your side of development, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, has crossing guards that are on your side. But the other side has no crossing guards, and in order to kind of make it what we considered, with consultation with the police department, fair, we were able to keep the resources on your side, which is the crossing guards. The other side, we did provide buses because of the factor of the speed limit, the lanes, Amwell Law, it's a major state road, and that was the deliberating factor.
So are you providing the bus for all that side, Fleming Drive, and all the other streets, all the other complex over there?
I don't, to be honest, I don't know. I can try to, I don't know specifically what buses and what we're providing for, but I know we did start a bus route because of the safety concern, the speed limits, and the amount of traffic that was heading through and back and forth. I can't answer. I can research and get back to you, but I couldn't at this forum give you exactly who we're busing in that development.
That would only be fair, right? If Fleming Drive is getting, everybody on that side should get it also. Because if it is not safe for people from Fleming Drive...
Yeah, I mean, I can confirm that. It's a good question, and I can absolutely look in and confirm that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thomas Zabelli, 9 Upper Neshannock Court. I'll try to make this quick. I just, clarification and more or less a comment. Clarification is, if the referendum for those two projects that we were speaking of earlier made it onto the ballot, they would be two separate things, correct?
That's to be determined. It could be two separate questions. It could be a question that covers both. That's for the board to determine.
I would prefer it to be two. If we ever get to that point, I would prefer.
Okay.
Why?
Thank you for your input.
I just think that makes. Why? Yeah. Because I think that the parking lot is more of a need right now, and
Safety of the students on the field are good.
Well, I think that the safety of the students on the field are important. However, I think that there's other ways that we can find to pay for the turf specifically.
Thank you for your input, Mr. Zavelli.
And my comment, the gentleman is no longer here, but he said that they did deeper due diligence on these two projects after he learned that there was an interest or a need to have these projects possibly undertaken. And from me attending some of the board meetings and watching them on YouTube as well, it seemed to me that there was an interest or a need to have these projects possibly considered. So his comment about being to do these, look at these two projects specifically and do more due diligence, I think, was a mistake because of the fact that it was pretty obvious that there was a need or a great interest among the board and possibly the public to look at these two projects specifically. That's all. Thank you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Zavelli. Hi.
Hi, Leisha Gaber-Bayless. Wasn't going to talk, but I was inspired. So I just had a couple questions. With the architect, is he paid by hour, or does he just have a lump sum for the two projects?
He's actually paid, we have a price scale that we set up with him. So what he does is he assesses each project and he gives us a fixed project cost. That's way better than getting an hourly bill from a professional, so we were able to work that out for the board. In the past, the board has had sort of a history of getting some bills that we were not comfortable with, so we did agree with this architect that he would give us a fixed rate per project.
Also, Mr. Mahmood,
Yeah.
if I can add, in the past, we've had architects that charge by percentage of the project,
Yeah.
and that's how we always, in fact, they would, when we appointed the architect in past years, the percentage that they were going to charge on project was a factor in, whether we're going to appoint them or not. But sometimes that you can wind up spending a lot of money on the bigger projects. I think it's kind of refreshing that he came in to us at the beginning and said, before we hired him, and said, it doesn't cost me any more to draw up the plans for a $50,000 project than it does sometimes for $1.5 million project. So I'm going to charge you what it costs me. And we thought that was refreshing, and that's one of the things he does. So that's how he gets paid.
Okay, thank you. And that cost includes him going to the state and contacting them and doing an application for this 40%, right? Like, would you ever take that on yourself to maybe lessen his cost? I don't know what his cost is.
It has to be certified by a professional.
So for that specific application, that has to be certified by a professional architect and our architect of record, which is Samjin. So that our board architect of record is the one who has to make that submission. So
Okay,
we're
that's all
authorizing
rolled
him to
into
do
his
so.
cost.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not architects, so we don't have the qualifications to do it ourselves.
I could comment, Alicia, on one thing. I think this is a plus for the district, if I may.
Sure.
For example, the ROD grants that we submitted for, and there was a whole big thing where we submitted a lot of ROD grants. Some district utilized their architect of record to actually do the paperwork to get the money back from the state, to get the 40% back. We internally in-house, it took us, and I want to thank Beth Martello publicly. She has been working with the Department of Construction for months doing the paperwork. So a lot of districts will pay the professional services. We have been able to do that in-house and save thousands and thousands of dollars to get that 40% back. And that's a hectic task and very monotonous, but I'm proud to say that we did that internally.
So Beth Martello is...
She kind of helped with that. She assisted with that.
I don't know who she is.
She's a member. She's in procurement. She's in the administrative staff. She's in procurement and the administrative staff. So.
Okay, I think that was sort of along the lines of where I was going, if someone in staff could do some of the legwork too to help save costs. So it sounds like you're doing that. Good. Also just wondering with the turf, if for some reason you can't get it done, you can't get fundraising, could the kids use open space? Like Ann Van Middlesworth Park, I know they have some baseball fields and things like that. Could they use that as a temporary until you raise the money?
We'd have to look into alternatives if the field came to a point where it was unsafe and we were not able to use it. We would have to figure out what the contingency plan would be, and so we'd have to figure that out. So I'd like to, we've got. The next year, we're getting the maintenance to last us through this coming year. So we'll have to determine what those contingencies plans would be.
Just brainstorming on other things that you could possibly do. Because when I grew up, not here, but general kids didn't use the fields. It was always the after-school kids. So,
Okay. Thank you.
Also, just with our upcoming community involvement, yay. Just letting you know, we do have really solid Facebook groups that have 2, 3, maybe 4,000 people in it. So that's another way of getting the message out to people, especially who don't have kids in the system yet, such as myself. And I remember that you mentioned that you're possibly going to have 4 meetings for the general public, hoping that 100 people would come, and then maybe 3 evening workshops for about 24 people only to come to discuss more of the budgeting and really getting in the nitty-grits. You had said the first meeting would be about what's working. Second, the vision. Third, combine all ideas. And fourth, the data night. I might suggest if you would combine possibly 2 and 3, bring 4 up to 3, and then maybe make 5 be general brainstorming on how you could get the budget and everything to sort of fit into place. A little bit more community involvement on that section as well, especially if you're only going to be having 3 workshops with only 24 people.
Okay.
I'd join in for those too if you're interested.
Thank you for providing that input.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none. We'll move on to the action agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Kinst. I ask for the board's consideration of the following motions under the area of education: to approve travel and related expenses, to approve the teachers participating in the Next Generation Science Standards Summer Institute, to approve membership between our district and the Princeton University and the Teachers as Scholars Consortium, to award the IDEA grant for 15-16, award the NCLB and ESEA and NCLB fiscal year 2016 numbers, approve overnight trips as listed, the ELL Summer Enrichment Program approvals, also approve teachers to participate in the UME and the PLC Summer PD Institute, approve curriculum writing and mathematics as listed, approve overnight band trip, approve a nurse to attend the overnight band trip, approve the HIB investigation list.
I'd also like to add resolution or item A13, it's a resolution that reads as, be it resolved that the superintendent's decision in HIB matter HMS-201415-00012 is hereby affirmed. So that's item A13. So first, entertain a motion to approve items A1 through A12 of the action agenda.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Ms. Hanson, then
Dana.
Gotcha. Any discussion for items A1 through A12? Dr. Sasan.
Just a question for Dr. Antunes. Item A11, the nurse for the school band trip. Can you please clarify
I knew that was
what
coming.
portion? I'm going to ask it every time. It might be useful just to put it in the
Yes,
minutes.
Mrs. Bork indicated that the amount would be covered by the association.
By the association. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Any other questions for our items A1 through A12?
1 through 12, right?
1 through 12, yes. Okay, roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood.
Surely. Ms. Bogoshevsky?
Yes.
Ms. Santafonte?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mrs. Haas?
Yes.
Mrs. Haley?
Yes.
Ms. Wasson?
Yes.
Mr. Kins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Motion passes. I'd like to entertain a motion for item A3, as I read earlier.
So-
A13, sorry.
So moved.
So moved. Thank you, Dr. Sun. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Haas. Okay. Roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood.
Sure. Ms. Bogoshevsky?
Yes.
Ms. Santafonte?
Abstain.
Okay. Mr. Cohen?
Abstain.
Okay. Mr. Gillette?
Abstain.
Mrs. Haas?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Haley?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasson?
Yes.
And Mr. Kins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Motion passes. Continuing on with the action agenda, Dr. Schiff.
Thank you. I ask for the board's consideration of the following motions that I'm recommending under the area of human resources: to approve the attached resolution to increase a Mandarin Chinese teaching position, to approve the retirements of Denise Mehring, who has been with us as Dr. Antunes' secretary since October of 1990, and we certainly express our appreciation for her dedicated service to our district. Also, Elizabeth Ponce Leon, teacher of special education at the Hillsborough High School, who's been with us since January 4th of 2010. We thank her for her service as well. Linda Rose, fifth grade teacher at Alton Road School, has been with us since 1978. Thank her for her service, as well as Diane Thomas, computer teacher at Triangle, who has been with us since September 1 of 2004. We thank her for her service as well. Resignations, approve the resignations as listed. Approve the revised leaves of absences. Approve the leaves of absences. Approve contract changes. Affirm the transfers and change in assignments. We have many of those. Affirm the reappointments. And motion to approve the termination of employment contract, and to approve the appointments of long-term sub, instructional assistants, co-curricular advisors, coaches, substitutes, and affirm the appointments of teachers, school psychologists, long-term substitutes, lunch aid, approval of student teachers, approval of payment for independent studies is listed, approve extra period coverages and projected extra period coverages, approve 6 period coverages, approve summer work hours, extended school year program, approve revised unaffiliated administrator salary list, approved unaffiliated staff salaries, approve Hillsborough High School coaches, as well as middle school coaches, approved technology turnkey trainers, revised summer enrichment program, approve the employment agreements for unaffiliated administrators.
I'd like to entertain a motion to approve items B1 through B25 of the action agenda.
Second.
Okay, and there's kind of some separations.
Before we take a roll call, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sorry. Well, two things. Statement one, Denise Meering, sorry to see her go. Great person. Secondly, seems to be an inordinate amount of coaches leaving. Can we get should I wait for later? My recommendation that let's find out why there's so many openings, how many openings there are, why they're open. Is this reflective of something current, or is this a trend that we always have year after year after year? Okay. I don't know what we had last year, if this is inordinate or not inordinate.
Okay. We'll direct that to
HR.
Yep. We'll direct that to the HR committee. You'll have it the
Thank
notes.
you. Sorry for interrupting you, Raymond.
No, that's good.
No, that's good. That's fine, because I want to separate B20.
B20, okay. Which one?
B931.
B931, okay. And I'm separating B21 and 22. Okay. Any other separations? Got to keep them separated. Okay, so this is now for items B1 through B25, excluding B931, B20, B21, and B22.
Gotcha.
Everything else. Okay.
We're playing bingo.
Yeah, right?
B9.
All right, roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood.
Surely. Ms. Bogoshevsky?
Yes.
Ms. Santafonte?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mrs. Haas?
Yes.
Mrs. Haley?
Yes.
Ms. Wasson?
Yes.
Mr. Kins?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve item B931 of the action agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood.
Surely. Ms. Bogoshevsky?
Yes.
Ms. Santafonte?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mrs. Haas?
Yes.
Mrs. Haley?
Abstain.
Okay. Ms. Wasson?
Yes.
And Mr. Kins?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve item B20 of the action agenda.
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Jen Haley, a second. Gotcha. I'm with you.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Gillette?
Yeah, thank you. So I apologize that I was not here last month for the discussion of the unaffiliated salaries, unaffiliated staff salaries. But I have a couple of quick things to say about it. I'm opposed to a 2.4% increase for the unaffiliated staff right down the line like this. What I have wished for several years now is that for the staff members, the employees that are not affiliated with the union, that we're able to treat differently, that we should at least give the superintendent the opportunity to begin to employ some type of merit-based system for raises, increases. I know that can't be done here tonight or for this time, but the difference between, well, let me start this way. We don't have a merit-based system in place for these 30 employees, but we did several months ago receive some recommendations from a consultant particularly about the business office, and many of these, some of these employees are part of the business operations office. And we received some recommendations. Among the recommendations were that maybe one or two employees were not being properly compensated as compared to the work that is done in school districts across the county or state. Were not being properly compensated for the work that they were doing because they were doing work above their job title. In discussion with Mr. Mahmood during this process, we learned that they needed to do this work above their job title. This was needed for the operations of the business office, and it was appreciated and needed. The difference between a 2% raise for everybody cumulative, all 30 people, and 2.4%, which Dr. Schiff has asked for, is something like $7,000. That $7,000 would go a long way to being used to properly compensate the 1 or 2 employees that are being underpaid for the work that they are doing. At least it would be a start for the system. So what I'm saying is that I wouldn't be opposed to. Well, I'm not a hardliner on the 2%. So in other words, 2% is nominally, a decent increase. If Dr. Schiff came to me and said, "Look, I really need 2.5% cumulative because I need to implement some type of, we need to adjust some people's salaries, and I need 2.5." Okay, 2.5, 2.4. I would give the 2.4. But I'd like to see the difference between the 2 and the 2.4 used to correct some of the issues we have. Because now I don't see those issues ever being corrected. This is our chance. I don't know why board members that, I know why I missed last month's meeting, but I'm sorry that I missed it because I think you've all agreed already that 2.4% is going to be the increase. I just don't see some people on the board that are hardliners at 2% agreeing to 2.4 for anything at any time if it's within our realm of possibility not to. So I've had my say on it. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Mr.
Can I
Gillette.
reply? May I reply to what he had
Sure,
to
you
say?
can discussion, yeah. This discussion.
Number one, I trust Dr. Schiff in terms of determining his staff and his staff's worth and their willingness to do the work he asked them to do for the pay he's paying them. If Dr. Schiff wants to come to the board and ask for some additional money to pay certain individuals in his staff, whether in a private manner, executive session, whatever, I have no problem with that. Absolutely not. And he knows he can do that if he wants to. In the discussion we had in that meeting, what it came down to was the total dollar amount was $15,000. And I just was not going to sit there and tolerate another 30-minute argument over $15,000, whether we're going to give them 2% or 2.4%, or if we're going to do a merit raise or not a merit raise. The point being that these people would be sent the wrong message if you said they are not equal to what these people are making. And I was not allowing that to happen, and I trust Dr. Schiff when he says he did not want that message to be sent.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And this did go back, this is going back to HR, looking at the discussion that we had. We had, I think, a very good discussion. HR is being charged with it. Dr. Schiff is going to help the committee to try and look at this so that we're addressing it throughout the year and not at the end of the year.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
No problem. Again, this is for item B20. Roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood.
Surely. Ms. Bogoshevsky?
Yes.
Ms. Santafonte?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Gillette?
No.
Okay. Mrs. Haas?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Haley?
No.
Okay. Mrs. Mrs. Soisson?
Dr. and Mrs. Swasson.
Dr. Mrs. Soisson. It's a new title. It's a new title.
I heard Dr. Professor. Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Mr.
yes.
Kids?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve items B21 and B22 of the action agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood.
Okay. Ms. Bogoshevsky?
Yes.
Ms. Santafonte?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mrs. Haas?
Yes.
Mrs. Haley?
Yes.
Ms. Soisson?
Yes.
And Mr. Kids?
Abstain.
Abstain.
Yep.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Continuing with the action agenda, Dr. Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Kintz. I ask for the board's consideration of the following motions under the area of operations: to approve the monthly financial reports and bills list, approve the line item transfers, approve state contract for purchasing, as well as a resolution increasing the bid threshold, approve the resolution for school facilities projects, approve the interlocal agreement for cooperative purchasing, approve transportation renewal contracts with First Student as listed. And as you can see in your agenda, there's many of them. Approve the transportation renewal contracts with Valcheck Busing. Approve approve the transportation renewal contracts with Kensington Bus Company. Accept the donation from Deirdre Godin, one of our language arts teachers who just recently retired from the high school, for a variety of different machines and dies and stamps. And we appreciate her donation to our school, as well as the Aris Home School Association for playground improvement repair, in an estimated donation to the district that we will do the work that's requested in the amount of approximately $9,940. Also approve Dr. Charles Ivory as our facilitator for strategic planning. And that's all we have.
I'd like to entertain a motion to approve items C1 through C12 of the action agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions?
Can we separate C6?
C6? Okay. Okay. All right. So this will be for items C1 through C5 and C7 through C12. We had a number of bus renewals that's based on the contracts that we awarded previous year in the CPI. Are there any routes that still need to be put up for bid for the year?
Yes.
Okay.
There is, Mr. Kintz. We have not put the renewals for Barker Bus Company on this agenda. Okay. We are looking to renew those routes and go put it out to bid and see what the results are of that bid. If we're satisfied with that, we will hopefully select a different contractor.
Okay. And that's for the
Barker. No, it's all routes.
All
routes.
Okay.
Those are various
routes.
routes
The routes that Barker Bus won.
Yes.
The bid that they won last year.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Again, items C1 through C5 and C7 through C12.
Do we have time to leave that to the end of August?
Because of the circumstances, Mrs. Decker feels that we should have a bus company in hand. We will then ask the board, once we get the commitment, Ms. Decker would make the commitment to that vendor and then ask for approval from the board at the end of August. So we're aware of that, but we believe that we have to put this out to bid. It's one of those things where we don't have an option.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood.
Sure. Ms. Bogoshevsky?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Santafonte?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mrs. Haas?
Yes.
Mrs. Haley?
Yes.
Ms. Wasson?
Yes.
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Motion passed.
I'd like to entertain a motion to approve item C6 of the action agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Go ahead.
Any discussion? No. Okay. Roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood.
Sure. Ms. Bogoshevsky?
No.
Okay. Ms. Santafonte?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Haas?
Yes.
Mrs. Haley?
No.
Ms. Wasson? And Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Motion passes. Okay. Continuing on with the action agenda, open up to the public again for comments. This could be on anything. All right. Seeing none. Any comments, news from the board members?
Real quick.
Mr. Gillette.
Last month, I sadly attended a funeral of a woman who was sort of a mentor of mine for the years I've been on the board and before, Marion Fenwick, a longtime Hillsborough resident. I think she moved here in 1951, if I'm not mistaken. And she was a board member during the time when the high school was built. And she was also concurrently a board member and a member of the Township Committee, I think the only time that's ever happened in Hillsborough. And shortly thereafter, that was outlawed by the state. You couldn't do that. In fact, she was asked to resign, I think, from either one of those positions when she was elected to the other one. And she said, no, I'm not resigning either one. I'm going to be on both. And she was. She was also the first woman mayor of Hillsborough Township. And I know I'm already missing her. So I just want to say thank you, Marion, wherever you are, for the for the help you've given me as a board member over the years when I've called you in frustration for you to hear your words of wisdom. I'm going to miss that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Any other news? Okay. I've got the information as was in the attachments. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We're adjourned. Thank you very much.